4 weeks ago, I set out to teach how to make 3 different kinds of shoe styles in 3 weeks. I wasn't able to finish all 3 because I had to travel to the UK for work. Now I'm back, so let's continue. We've made Oxfords and we've also made this Blue Chart Derby. Now it's time for us to make a pair of loafers. Welcome to Pomo Bespoke. If what I've described is the kind of thing that you think you would like, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And this pair of Oxford, this particular design was requested by a member of the channel, Akim. So if you have designs that you want to suggest, don't forget to join our membership on the channel. Now, this is the mean form that we're going to use. If you don't know what a mean form is, you probably should watch the first videos in the series. So the last length of this mean form is 24 cm. So we're going to design on our mean form. So the first thing we will do is to outline the mean form on a plain piece of paper, and then we will go ahead and start our design. On this outline, you can see that I have marked the tip, the fan point, the instep, the counterpoint, the middle of the back line, and of course the ball. So let's draw our vamp line, and then we'll bisect the vamp line. We'll basically divide it into 2. Then we'll draw the quarter line from the counterpoint to the middle of the vamp line. Now, if you remember from the Oxford and Derby class, we will draw our top line by dividing the quarter line, drawing a line from the instep to meet that subdivision, and then draw the top line like that. And if you curve this in like that and curve that area there, you have the top line of your Derby or Oxford. But this is a pair of loafers that we're designing, so there are, slightly different rules. Now you can see that the pair of loafers that we have here is not like the regular one. So I typically start out by designing a simple loafers. And I usually do that by starting with the tongue. I start my tongue about 1 cm beneath the instep. So that's 1 cm beneath the instep. I draw a right angle from there. Now the last length is 24 cm, which means that this line you see here will be 1/8 of the last length. Remember the rule of quarters. This is going across the last, and that's 1/8 of the last length. So 1/8 of 24 is 3 cm. So we mark 3 cm on that line. Next, we will mark 1 cm beneath the middle of our vamp line and connect that 3 cm point on the tongue line to that point that we marked beneath the middle of our vamp line. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you curve this area in like so, you see that you already have the outline of a basic simple pair of loafers design. So if you clean out these areas that we really don't need, it becomes readily apparent that this is a simple pair of loafers, which is exactly what we have here. So I'm going to keep this one aside and design this design that we have that was suggested to us by Akim. Akim, you remember when you asked me how to design this, I sent you the video on how to do a simple pair of loafers. So what I'm going to really do, which was what I asked you to do initially, is to modify this simple loafers design to your taste. So let's do that. Now, if you notice from the model photo that we are trying to replicate, the back height is a little bit higher than, it's quite higher than the counterpoint. And then there is an elastic just around about there. And we've mentioned that you can have your back height start as much as 1 cm above your counterpoint. So I've drawn the back height and a line to represent the new top line from that point 1 cm above the counterpoint to meet that elastic point. All I need to do now to have some fidelity between the model and what we are designing is to curve upwards all of those undulations that they have along the top line just to represent them on the top line. So I curve downward like this and then curve it upwards again until it comes to meet that point where the elastic connects to the top line. Basically, that's all that happened in that top line like that. And for this part of the vamp that curves down like this, if I join a line from the vamp point to this intersection point of the tongue and the top line and clean out this point like this, you see that I have that all sorted. So let me outline what we have just done. So basically all I'm trying to say is that once you design the simple loafers, then you can easily modify it to taste to whatever you want to do, and which is just what I have done here. So I'm basically trying to fine-tune things a little bit to ensure that they are representative of what we have in the model that we are using. I think I'm done here, ladies and gentlemen. The next thing that we need to do is to do the springing. In the meantime, let me just outline what we have so that you see that we have done all of that. So this will be the elastic, and I'll just go ahead and clean out all of the lines that we really don't need to represent our design, and you can see that this is all done. So that's the design of what was sent to us. Clean out the lines that we don't need, and ladies and gentlemen, that is the loafers that was sent to us. But we still have this simple one. So in springing, we'll first of all spring the simple one, so that if you learn how to spring the simple one, you can basically deploy the same principles in springing the complex ones. So you start by learning the simple things, and then you can complicate them as much as you want. First of all, let's cut it out, and then we will go ahead and spring it. What I'm doing here is called back center line tightening. You factor in some space for your backstay, and then tighten the top of your back center line so that it hugs tightly on your last. I'm not going to really explaining what I'm really doing there is beyond the scope of this video, but just know that that exists, and then maybe in some video I'll talk about the theory behind it, but just know that there's such a thing. So let's go on to springing. First thing, before we do that, let's mark in our tracing channels. I'm not marking in tracing channels in this case. I'm just punching holes along the design line so that we can really just mark them out as we proceed. So springing, we cut along the vamp line, open it up by about 5 mm and secure that in place. Half a centimeter, open it up by about half a centimeter and secure it in place. Then the next thing we will do is at the intersection point between the tongue and the top line, we'll draw a right angle. We'll extend that right angle to the tongue, and the point where it touches the tongue and then the tip of the pattern, the standard, are going to be the reference points for our springing. So we'll place those 2 points on the center line of our folded paper, and then draw in all of the parts of this standard, marking all of those points until we get to that intersection point between the top line and the tongue. So we're marking all of those points until we get to this intersection point. And then using that intersection point as pivot, we'll pivot down until the tongue touches the center line, and then we'll mark in the rest of the points. With this, ladies and gentlemen, we have sprung the simple loafers pattern. So we can basically draw this in, and we have it all sprung and duplicated. Next, we'll just add about 2 cm of lasting allowance, about 1 mm of stitching allowance at the back. Just mark out the intersection point properly, and we can basically just cut it out, and our simple loafers is all sprung and ready for use. The reason I love this method of springing, you see the way that top line curved inwards, it will hug on the last tightly, and it aids in ensuring that you don't have top lines that, you know, flap around the sides, especially when the wearer is wearing them. So let's do the same thing really for the much more complicated design that we have. First thing, we open it up by about 5 mm like we did previously and secure that in place. Now, like we did before, we're also going to, at that intersection point, we're going to draw. So let's make sure we have the intersection point marked out properly. Draw a right angle from the intersection point, and then extend the line to meet the tongue. Those 2 points are going to be our reference points for springing. So placing those 2 points on the center line, we will mark out all the parts of this standard until again we get to that intersection point, the intersection between the tongue and the top line. So now we'll mark out these points. Now using that point as pivot, we'll pivot until the tongue lies on the center line, and then we'll mark in the rest of the tongue. Remember, when we pivot, this line of the vamp should also be marked in. So you see that we have 2 lines. This one representing the back, and that one representing the vamp. So let's mark in the vamp line, the vamp pattern, which is this. I guess just straighten things out so that they look nice with a ruler. Curve that in, add our 2 cm of lasting allowance, and there you have it. We have our vamp. So that's our vamp. Now this part we can simply duplicate by placing it on folded paper like so. I'm basically just duplicating that. Now I'm going to put I'm going to punch in a hole at the point where the elastic slots into the top line so that it's not confusing to me. So you see that I put in that hole there. So if I draw this line like this, draw that line. Don't forget that we'll add a stitching allowance here, add our lasting allowance, and then basically, ladies and gentlemen, that is the rest of the top line. Now the lining of this back part is going to be a stitch and turn kind. So I'm adding about 1 mm of stitching allowance at the top line, so that I have, now I'm indicating that point where the elastic will slot in really, so that you don't miss it. So this is going to be the back pattern, which is going to slot into the vamp like so. All that is remaining is to do the pattern for the elastic, which is an easy thing to be done. You can see I don't think I need to explain exactly, just outline it, and then add the relevant stitching allowances that you require. So ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to stop talking right now so that you can just watch and observe how I finish out the elastic pattern. So that's it really. Basically, all you need to do is to learn how to make the simple loafers, learn how to spring it, and by basically using common sense to modify the techniques involved in making the simple loafers, you can, you know, do much more complicated designs to suit your taste and to suit the requirements of your customer, as the case may be. So that's what I said to share with you. If you're not a member of the channel yet, please do consider becoming a member. Membership costs less than $1 every month. You actually do help us to keep the channel running, to buy data, to just, you know, encourage us to keep doing what we're doing. So if you're not a member and you stayed up to this long, you should become a member. So thank you for being here. God bless you. See you on the next video. Bye bye.